Hi everyone, and welcome to London Tech Leaders. Obviously, in the current kind of pandemic situation, we typically host these meetups in person. For now, obviously, for the foreseeable, we're going to be moving these to more of a virtual meetup, hosted quarterly. So, look, really appreciate everyone joining us this evening. From our panelists, our speakers, appreciate everyone's got a busy schedule at the moment, but hopefully you get some valuable content out of the session. We've got some really exciting kind of conversations to be discussed this evening. And there's also an opportunity for our audience to partake in kind of asking our panelists some questions themselves. Just to kind of set aside kind of today, first and foremost, in part of the agenda, we're going to have Rajesh Agrawal, who's Deputy Mayor of London for Business, who's kindly joined us this evening to do some opening remarks all around the kind of current business climate in the midst of COVID-19, the technology sector, and also kind of London's plan for recovery. We're then going to move into a virtual panel session. So really exciting lineup this evening as well. For those who joined us at the Telegraph event in November last year, we had David Crawford comparing, he's back again, kind of comparing this session with Bontle Senne from Virgin Media, Phil Clayson from SSE Energy Services, Liz Warner from, who's recently joined Tenets Banking, so congratulations on that appointment. Mark Lillie, who's one of the senior Deloitte partners across kind of global tech and energy sector, and Derrick Mccourt from Microsoft UK. So David and the panelists are all going to introduce themselves, but if you do want to ask a question to one of our panelists, please use the chat box below throughout the session, and then David will direct the best question to whoever's kind of suitable. Just a bit about London Tech Leaders. Obviously, we're a community. It's our second event, so really excited to kind of bring another kind of great speaker lineup to everyone in terms of our leadership community. The organizer, David, Jack, and myself, who you might have kind of spoken to previously. Why do we set this up? Essentially, we recognise there's a need for a platform where industry leaders could network with their peers, share innovative ideas, and kind of challenge conventional thinking. Typically, we host these events in person, so it's a great opportunity to kind of have those kind of exclusive networking sessions with your senior leaders. Hopefully they'll be back in kind of 2021 when things start to kind of normalize. But look, if you are interested in speaking at a future event, please just drop one of us a note, and we'll try and accommodate that for kind of future meetups. We are on social, so please do tune in at London Tech Leaders on Twitter. If you are on Instagram, we do share a lot of our kind of images, content on that feed. And also for anyone who's just joined this event for today, please check our YouTube hub, London Tech Leaders. So we've got our previous events and panel sessions and content shared on there. We typically post our content a week after each session, so just check that page out and share with your teams if you're interested. We wouldn't be here without our sponsors. I'm one of the directors as well for WeShape, so I'm not going to do too much of a sales pitch, but we're a technology consultancy that specialises in DevOps, digital, agile, and cloud-native solutions, anywhere from kind of advisory, implementation, and coaching. One of our kind of key differentiators are we are behind and active in the community. So if you are interested in speaking one of our events, whether it be a leadership event or a technology practitioner level event, please just drop one of us a note. More than happy to have a conversation about that. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Rajesh Agrawal, Deputy Mayor of London for Business. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jack, and hello everyone. I hope you are all well and staying safe. Thank you very much for joining us today for this Tech London Leaders virtual panel. I appreciate being asked to join you today to briefly touch on the current business climate in the middle of this COVID-19 crisis on tech sector and the Mayor's plan for recovery. As we are all aware that we are in the middle of the biggest health, social and economic emergency that we have faced since the Second World War. And above all, the loss of life is clearly the most terrible impact and the reason we must do whatever it takes to reduce the transmission. The effects of the lockdown are still being felt by companies of all sizes and sectors, and we are well aware that many businesses are now struggling to survive. And it brings into focus the work that we do at City Hall to support businesses and London economy. I share the Mayor's determination to do everything we can to help London businesses of all sizes and from all sectors to stay afloat through the pandemic into the recovery. I'm incredibly impressed and I'm really truly grateful for all that the businesses and the communities are doing to help us overcome this deadly virus. We are all continuing to respond to the challenges created by the pandemic in our own personal and professional lives, even though truly the extent of the impact on us and the world we live in remains still uncertain. And even though we will continue to face challenges in the coming months, I'm optimistic. London is a resilient city which has overcome huge challenges in the past, and it will do so again. Coronavirus has forced organizations and workers in pretty much every industry to reinvent themselves, adapting to new working environments. Technology and innovation sit at the heart of this transformation and are important now more than ever before to get us successfully through this global pandemic. Without technology, we wouldn't be talking here to each other today. Without technology, we would have not been able to adapt so quickly, if at all, to this sudden and drastic disruption to the way we live and the way we work. And then, as many of you as tech leaders, and myself, by the way, my own background is from fintech. So, as tech leaders, many of you are now in the perfect place to continue to drive transformative change that will see your businesses survive and thrive through this difficult, hard time. Because even with unprecedented challenges, there comes opportunities as well. Whether that is better technology to enable effective working from home, a new software to help queue management in high streets, or an innovative solution to dining safely as restaurants and cafes begin to reopen. I know that London technology ecosystem will rise to the occasion. And I, for one, look forward to seeing the new innovations that develop over the coming year. And whilst I remain optimistic, there remains a great deal of uncertainty about how our economy and our city will look when we emerge from this crisis. But I'm very confident that London's dynamic economy will weather the storm of these unprecedented times. And whilst it's clear that we will continue to battle this pandemic for quite some time, we must now also look into the future to recovery and the reopening of the economy. And that is why we have provided additional support for the London Growth Hub, which is our business support portal to expand its advisory capacity. We've already held over 900 direct one-to-one advice sessions with businesses since the start of the crisis. And last month, the mayor launched the very exciting Pay It Forward initiative, which enables Londoners to support their local small businesses, which many small retail and hospitality businesses are already using to raise thousands of pounds. Over £250,000 have been raised so far, thanks to the contribution of about 4,000 members of the public. So the mayor's vision for recovery is to reshape London as a city that remains open and attractive for Londoners, visitors, and investors, and that addresses deep-seated inequalities to create new opportunities for people and businesses to thrive whilst moving forward towards a low-carbon, sustainable future. This will not be a return to the past or to business as usual. Things will change in the way we work, in the way we lead our organizations and our people. And at its heart, the recovery must be based upon a move towards a fairer economy and the one which is cleaner and greener. It goes without saying that innovation will be at the heart of achieving that. I know that we, the business community and the public sector, can work together to do so. London, I'll say this again, but London is a resilient city which has overcome huge challenges and will do so again together. So once again, I would like to thank you for attending today, for your interest and for your ongoing commitment to London and the UK, which is more important now than ever before. Thank you once again. And now I would like to hand over to David Crawford, Group CTO of Naked Wines. Thank you.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Rajesh. Some powerful words there. I think many of the questions that the panel are going to discuss this evening will resonate with a few of the topics that you covered there. I certainly agree that now is the time for technology to become all it can be, and I think with the kind of leaders I'm sure we've got on the panel here, but also in our audience tonight, I think we'll be able to do that. Thank you very much for your time, Rajesh. Really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, so as Rajesh said, I'm David Crawford. I'm the Group CTO of Naked Wines. That's a relatively new role for me. I've been in post for about 4 months. I managed 5 weeks in the office before we went into lockdown, so that in itself was kind of challenging. But I work for a wine business, so I've got good product and I'm getting through. I'll manage, I'm sure. I think that as Chris in his introduction said. Slightly, I'm going to take into account for this on his intro. He said, so David's back. He kind of said it like he couldn't keep me away, sort of thing. I'd have preferred a more like, and we welcome David back, but maybe they don't. Who knows? We'll see by the end of this panel session. Hopefully, it'll be some lively discussion amongst us all. We've got some questions that I'm going to address to the panel. I'll get them to introduce themselves in a moment. We'll go through the questions. They're all, as we've discussed and as Rajesh was talking about, all sort of associated with the current situation we find ourselves in across the world. So they've all got that sort of focus on them, but hopefully a good spread. And then I think, as Chris said, if anybody in the attendees in the audience tonight want to submit a question, then they can do so. And we'll try and pull some of those questions in at the end and see if we can get some views from our panelists on that. So without further ado, we're going to get into it. I'm going to ask the panelists to give themselves a brief introduction. And Liz, if we can start with you, please.
Yep, I'm just unmuting. So my intro changed from the time I accepted the offer to be on the panel to today. So I was quite recently CTO at Nationwide for Business, so a new SME bank backed by the largest building society in the world. And we were rather abruptly canceled thanks to the interest rate changes and economic uncertainty around that. So, fast forward a few weeks and I've got a complicated job title, but I'm looking after engineering and product for a company called 10X Future Technologies. So they're a core banking provider. So the lens through which I'll be approaching a lot of this discussion is sort of finance and fintech in regulated industries.
Brilliant. Thank you, Liz. Mark.
Evening, everybody. So I'm Mark Lillie. As you can see, I'm a bit of a Bond fan, and I like my Star Wars behind me. It's great to be here. So I've been with Deloitte about 10 years. I lead what we call our technology strategy and transformation business, which basically means I spend most of my time with and being a global role, it's quite interesting to see how the world has opened up a little bit more. So reflections on sort of what's happening in Asia Pac and sort of the east to west migration as things have evolved. So it's great to be here and looking forward to contributing.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mark. Bontle, if we could get you to do an intro.
Sure. Hi, I'm Bontle Senne, currently Executive Director for Transformation at Virgin Media UK. Before that, I was Agile Transformation Director at Deutsche Bank, leading their Agile Transformation in corporate investment banking technology. And before that, I was a consultant at McKinsey, specializing in digital and digital transformation. I sit on a number of boards, including most recently Girl Code, an organization focused on trying to get women and young women into tech.
Brilliant. You sound busy, Bontle. Phil.
Yeah, evening, everybody. Thank you, David. I'm Phil Clayson. I'm CEO of SSE Energy Services. Originally, SSE Energy Services was part of the SSE Group. We've recently been sold and are part of OVO Energy now, challenger brand in the energy sector. So running through major divestment alongside COVID has been an interesting few months. So yeah, thank you, David. That's me.
Brilliant. Thank you, Phil. And last but by no means least, Derrick.
Well, good evening, everyone. So Derrick Mccourt, I'm a general manager at Microsoft in the UK, part of our UK senior leadership team. My day job is I've got a big team of people who spend all of their time with our biggest strategic customers in the UK, helping them get cloud platforms to work for them. As you can imagine, over the last number of weeks, the team have never been as busy as people look to leverage cloud through the crisis. So plenty to talk about tonight.
Excellent, thank you, Derrick. I can imagine that you and your team have been pretty busy across the UK and beyond. So, all right, well, that's our panel for the evening. As you can see, we've got a fairly diverse bunch in terms of their knowledge and experience and the current companies that they're involved in. So hopefully that'll make for some interesting, possibly different stance points on some of these questions. Let's get going and see how we go. So, first question of the evening. Trading has been hard for some companies, and it has presented opportunities for others. Can everyone make it an opportunity by navigating the market and their customers in a different way? Or are some of these companies just not able to change and flex, and they're just going to fall by the wayside? Bontle, can we come to you for this one first?
Sure. So I want to be optimistic and say everyone has the opportunity to do things differently. But I think that a lot of the trends that we're seeing at the moment, the corona has made possible in terms of digitization, simplification, automation, more personalization, agile ways of working to get to faster lead times and time to market. None of that is new. That's all things that we've seen over the last couple of years, and things which digital challengers and startups, smaller organizations, and even some of the big established ones have taken up. So I think that there's going to be a lot of organizations that don't deserve to make it through this time because they have ignored the demands of their customer base and of a changing demographic in their employees, younger people who are excited about digitization and older as well, I assume. As a result of that, I think they're going to find themselves in a very difficult situation, which they have created for themselves.
Okay, so you say some don't deserve. I mean, that's probably not. I don't think you're saying as a result of COVID-19. You're saying actually this is just the straw that broke the camel's back, perhaps, and they should have been going on their journey, you know, earlier than this, and then they'd have maybe been more flexible and adaptable to deal with the vagaries of COVID-19. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's also a lot of companies that even today are trying to do as much as they can to get through this, to get back to normal, right? They imagine that the new things they're seeing in terms of digital trends and digitization, the demands of remote working are something that will pass. And I'm not sure that they will. So those are the companies that I say might not deserve to make it in the new normal that we're going to create together.
Okay. Mark, you got any views on that? You've got a lot of customers that you look after. Do they deserve to get through? Do they not deserve it? What have they done wrong? What should have they done better before now?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know about deserve. I mean, it's a really, really interesting question. I mean, I think the first thing is, you know, if you look at certain sectors, it's been, I mean, horrendous. I mean, some stats, you know, you look at something like Heathrow Airport, you know, passenger flight numbers down 97% in April. Oil and gas, pretty much a double black swan event. You've got COVID, you've also got the oil price going down to levels down in the low 20s per barrel. And when your cost base is up in the sort of the mid 30s in certain respects, in terms of, that is a super challenging time. And whether you deserve that or not, that's just, you know, so sector by sector, I think it's really tough. Having said that, you look at some amazing innovations of organizations have spun things up super quickly. I mean, retailers who've shifted from a physically based retail model to a click and collect in a matter of weeks. So the need for speed has definitely shown everything. And, you know, and I think there's, if you look at Amazon, I mean, you know, why do many of us use Amazon, and why were their sales up 26%? I think it was in Q1. I suspect they're going to be even higher because they are customer focused. It's simple, it's easy, it's convenient, and that's the kind of the basis for any customer centric strategy, right? It's why people go to certain customers or not. So I guess, you know, there are some thoughts, but we're gonna hit a horrible recession. I mean, there's a load of debate, isn't there, whether it's what is it, a swoosh, a hockey stick, a V. And I was speaking to an energy exec, and he looked at me on a Zoom call and said, no, it's going to be an L. So it's going to be tough times, irrespective of your customer centricity.
Okay, that's interesting. Liz, I think, you know, you came from Nationwide recently, where, as you said, that project was cancelled, and ostensibly due to COVID-19. I'm not sure it's as simple as that, but you wouldn't say that Nationwide aren't a company with resources. You wouldn't say that they aren't digitally focused and prepared for the new way of working. So how did you fall victim there? How did the project you were on fall victim there? And was it really COVID-19, or are we using that as an excuse?
I've gotten that question so many times. So that we went from absolute green light go across everything to nope, not going to do it in less than 3 weeks. Banking in particular, Nationwide in particular, incredibly sensitive to interest rates and interest rate changes. If you look at, strategically, the banks need to continue to modernize. But when the pot of money changes radically in projections around, how much money there is changes radically, I think, certain organizations go to sort of the native conservative stance. I think there's, across every industry, there's just this new rapid evolutionary pressure. Companies like Monzo are, laying off a huge number of people. The expectation that the VCs have that, that they'll just be exponential growth, that's going to be really hard for anybody to achieve. So I think we'll see a lot of consolidation under this pressure. At the same time, the big banks, they can't be on-prem. How are you on-prem when you can't go to the office? How do you service your customers who need to be able to open accounts without leaving their homes? So the pressure is on. It'll be an extinction event for some companies, certainly. But it'll be really interesting. I think everything that would have happened, or a lot that would have happened, is just going to go a lot faster now.
Okay, and a sort of supplementary, if anybody else wants to chip in with this, if any of our audience is sitting there and they're feeling like they're at this inflection point where they're not sure whether this current situation is going to really put their company under or not, is there any sort of anything they can do now? Is it too late? Can they what sort of things could they look to tackle now that might help them from going under, do you think? As a general, throw it out. Anybody who wants to tackle that one?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to give a view, David. I think organizations that have thrived in this time, irrespective of the new market pressures that they've been under, are those that were pretty agile businesses in the first place. And, that could be, agile from a technology perspective, but actually broadly agile with, the business, aligned to the technology in the organization. So those organizations have thrived, have been able to respond to that need to switch to technology solutions pretty quickly. So, if organizations are going to thrive in this new world, they really need to think of themselves as software companies, as digital companies at their core, and embrace that. And that means investing in their tech teams, in the developers in the organization, because they are going to be actually the people who are going to build the solutions that are going to take those organizations out of the current crisis. So that in itself, if that hasn't been embraced already in an organization, needs to be the thing that they embrace going forward.
Okay, so I think the good message that's coming out of there is that those who had already embraced some of those things, and some that the other panelists talked about, should be in a good position to weather the storm of COVID-19. Those who haven't, get into those things. But those messages that we're giving out are consistent. These aren't COVID-19 knee-jerk reactions. These are messages that, as senior leaders within technology, we've all been giving out to our peers and other companies for a long time now. Yeah. And so I think that in itself, in a turbulent time, gives some kind of calmness to people. It's like, stay with it, keep going. Yeah. All right. So let's move on to another question then. I think this one might get our audience submitting some of their points of view. So we'll see where we go with this. So recently, Twitter, famously now, announced that all of their employees can work from home forever. Wasn't that nice? Apart from the ripples that it caused the rest of the questions that we then got from our employees. Is this something that you and your organization might support? And I suppose a sub-question is, or the customers that you serve, the organizations that you have as customers, And what are the pros and cons that you could see, therefore, if we go to a much more embracing working from home? Mark, you got any views on that for either your team or your customers?
Yeah. So I think for many executives, this has been a real eye-opener. I mean, you know, they have been forced to run exec meetings, board meetings, frankly, to do their jobs, you know, remotely. They've been forced to use the technology. And funnily enough, the technology's really worked. I think partly because it's not particularly, if you think about it, it's not new technology. I mean, you know, this is video conferencing's been around, so I'm just being ravaged by a cat. This is one of the things about.
All audience members are welcome, Mark.
Live broadcasting. And I think because the technology has worked, they have become almost by definition more tech savvy, more aware of what's been possible. And to a certain extent, I think the CIOs, the tech leaders are almost on a pedestal now because they've enabled that, because they've been forced to use it with something. So I think there's an appreciation for the art of the possible. And many, I mean, to give you an example, so I've been doing a bunch of tech trends briefings for my clients, and for some reason I had a few recently in the Nordics. So ordinarily what I would do is I would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, tired, grab a cab to the airport, to Heathrow, jump on the plane, go over to Helsinki, get a cab at the other end, maybe have a briefing in the Deloitte office beforehand, straight over to the client, do the 1 hour briefing, get back in a cab, like ding, 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 the train, arrive back home, late evening, pretty shattered. Maybe it was a great meeting or not, but now I can have exactly the same impact, often in a more engaging way with others joining remotely. Think about the carbon footprint I've saved. Think about the expense I've saved. You know, so if you sort of look at that, and that's just one microcosm case study. So I think that there have been a real eye-opener for many people. I think some of the cons, though, to your question, David, I mean, we've seen mental health and well-being challenges increasing. You know, a lot of thing about being physically together with people is that camaraderie. We've certainly seen that. We've seen induction of new employees harder because there's something about coming into that physical environment. Come on, let's have a coffee. So that's something to sort of think about, I think. And of course, it's easy for many of us. We've all got, you can see in our backgrounds, we've all got offices and we've got our space. Many people are less privileged and actually have flat shares, and it's harder for them. So, you know, I think we need to be aware of those challenges. It's hard for certain audiences. But I think the long and the short is, and we've done some research and data on this, I just need to find some facts and figures, but we did some crowdsourcing stuff. So 77% of people who have the opportunity to work from home say they are more productive when they're at home. So that's, I think, pretty interesting. But there's some suspicion here where they think that 20% of their colleagues are more productive, but they think that 30% are less productive. So there's a bit of a trust thing going on here as well. And I guess the final stat, which I think is quite instructive, is so 54% of people say they would like to work from home more often. And just 1 in 10 say they plan to work from home less often. So that's across the nation. That's not Deloitte employees, that's across the nation. So I think some really interesting things. There's a movement going on here about how work gets done, the workplace, and so on. So it's pretty interesting, I think.
Those stats are pretty interesting. I just jotted them down. They sound like good ones to work with. Phil, what's your experience here? What are your thoughts on this?
So I think, I mean, a lot of what Mark said, I think all the companies are working through the same sort of challenges on how you sort of mix it up a little bit. I think what Twitter have done is really interesting. They have sort of laid down the gauntlet to a degree for everybody else. But I think what they've done is one size fits all. I mean, I don't think one size fits all, because if I look at the demographic of my team, which is an international team in its sort of full scale, but even just in the UK, I've got people who are at the early stage of their career. They're potentially still living at home. They're living in shared accommodation. They're living in small properties with limited space to actually effectively have a work-life balance separation physically within their home. At the other end of the scale, I've got people approaching retirement who their families have left home. They're at home with just one other person in some circumstances, and for them, getting into the office gives them work-life balance and improves their sort of mental well-being as well. They don't want to be in one place 24/7 with one other person. So I think there's that. For me personally, I think also I quite enjoy a bit of travel. It sort of breaks the day if you're going to a place to then return, maybe not 5 days a week. So I think there's a little bit of separation in your brain when you go home, then you're home, as opposed to sort of shuffling a couple of rooms along and doing that. So I don't think one size fits all. We're working really hard with our team to work out how we adjust for as many people as we possibly can. But at the minute, everyone's still effectively working at home. So it's not one size fits all by any stretch.
Okay, I think I hear that. I'm getting a lot of the same inquiries from my team, and can we work from home more? And I think it's interesting. Should we be going further than this, rather than just saying, yeah, okay, well that seems to work and productivity seems to be okay, so knock yourselves out? Should we be looking at how, when we do, because it's clear that sometimes people will want to go to the office, they will want to get together and collaborate. Should we be looking at how we can make more benefit of that? If we've got less people in the office, should we be looking to transform our office spaces to be much better collaboration workspaces rather than lots and lots of desks? Yeah. Should we be going, is there an opportunity here, not just a resigned, like, yeah, go on then, work from home if it works for you? Should we be going further? Derrick, you're nodding a lot. Go on, what have you got to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good call. You'd almost think as Microsoft, we'd have a vested interest in everybody working from home because of the massive growth that we've seen in our Teams platform during the crisis. And we've always had, a flexible working policy and empower people to work from home, when they want or when they can. But even our chief executive, Sachin Adel, has gone on the record and really been clear that he has reservations about the thoughts of permanently working from home. I've seen some of the chat coming through, those water cooler moments, or those moments where you just have that chat with somebody before the meeting or after the meeting where you make that personal connection. And we're actually thinking a lot. The timing is interesting. Prior to the crisis, we were going through a massive refurb of our UK headquarters, which are Reading based at Thames Valley Park. And obviously even the construction is shut down, but we're automatically thinking about what is that space going to look like. We're going to dial up the return to the office, in a responsible way and really slowly, and give people a lot of choice in this. And frankly, workspace that only because we've had this policy. When I joined Microsoft in the UK 10 years ago, we were on our way to building number 6 on that campus. We've doubled the number of employees that we have in the UK. And part of that refurb is we're falling back to only 3 buildings because of mobile flexible working. We just don't need the space. So we're already reshaping our office space to adapt to the world of this mix of remote and sometimes in the office. But we think that's going to accelerate. So we want more collaboration spaces. We want actually meeting rooms that it doesn't matter whether you're physically in the room or that you're remote, that you have that same experience. So I think organizations are going to have to think a lot more about those mixed environments, because we've changed the expectation of our people because they've become comfortable with working in home, and we can see it works, and that actually people are actually working longer hours and in many ways being more productive.
That's great. Liz, we've had a question come in associated with this. So I'll just pass this through while we're doing it. Lawrence Hubbard, thank you, Lawrence. Productivity may include coding or solving known problems. How much value do you think is lost by the limitations in creativity imposed by not being able to gather around a whiteboard and bounce ideas off each other, extended by the random additional interactions in stairwells and water coolers, as Derrick was just talking about? I mean, are we going to lose this here by just lazily walking into a, yeah, everybody can work at home, knock yourselves out?
I think in the short term, yes, we'll lose a lot of productivity. I mean, not speaking on a personal level, it took me about a day to really want a whiteboard in my conversations. Any technical or architecture conversation, you know, I want to draw it, I want to see people's faces, I want to have that conversation. At the same time, in software engineering, so much of your day is spent in flow, you know, or pairing with one person where you're doing very, very focused work. And in open office, especially office interruptions, can slow that down quite a bit. I suspect, once again, we're going to have pressure on companies to come up with better collaboration tools, better ways to whiteboard together, to kind of get that sense of proximity. The tools we have are okay. I think there's just a ton of room. You look at some of the, you know, virtual or kind of augmented realities, you know, semi-virtual, you know, options that we have or could have. I think it's going to get really interesting. It would be hard if you just couldn't whiteboard, you couldn't brainstorm with your team. At the same time, you know, you're balancing that against the, you know, the ability to work in a flow state for an extended period of time, which you don't get, you know, in most offices.
Sure. Okay. We're going to move on, but I'm just going to end on this one by picking up a point that one of our attendees, Louise, has made. I won't read out your whole question, Louise, but in effect, I think what's underneath it is she's saying, given the magnitude of the pandemic and all of the associated stress that we're going through at the moment, you know, life's a bit hectic at the minute. What if our measurements are off here, right? What if actually we're going, you know, Mark's stats had productivity and, you know, 70% good, but then there was a 30% not so good. What if that's because people are under stress and strain? You know, maybe although the opportunity has been presented to us here, maybe when life returns to more normal, we should measure again, you know, and look at that again. And I think that's a really good point that Louise has raised. So thank you for that, Louise. That was great. All right. That was a good conversation. I figured it was gonna get passions raging. So let's move on to the next question. What level of confidence do you think we will see compared to last year in investing in the market for tech companies? So this is external investment. Liz, I'm going to pick on you again because you've had a recent experience around, you know, appetite for investing in new ventures and stuff like that. What do you think? Is it going to go big on this, or are people going to start taking their money out?
What I have seen personally so far is just a lot of caution. I mean, we're all tired of the phrase unprecedented times, but you know, that's where we are. I think it'll take a long time for investments to settle. I mean, that said, there's a spreadsheet, a Google Sheet flying around that I keep getting linked to, which is, you know, investors ready to invest. So, you know, there are folks out there, but my guess is we're going to have a year plus of a whole lot of caution, you know, as people figure out what the world looks like. I'm sure I see Mark nodding a lot and smiling and nodding, so I think there's opinions there.
Jump in, guys. If you've got an opinion, jump in.
I was just going to pile in on Liz's point. I mean, I was going to totally agree. I think there is, you know, we do a load of CFO surveys and stuff. I mean, there is, the sentiment is batten down the hatches, cost is everything, you know, invest with incredible care. Certainly when we done M&A surveys, the sentiment is that deals will be smaller and there'll be fewer of them over the next 12 months. We did some, my colleagues did some analysis that implied in the first 8 weeks of the lockdown, there was $1 billion investment in tech businesses in the UK, but only 52 million that could be identified. So 5% was for first-time investments. So these were sort of, the other investments were just piling in on, if you like, proven investments. So I do suspect if someone's going to try and launch some sort of new startup at the moment, it's going to be a friends and family type investment as opposed to some slightly more, you know, private equity or whatever. And as with all tech, successful tech is because it solves a business problem that helps. It's not, you don't fall in love with the technology, you fall in love with the problem. And I think often, you know, there's going to be more caution around, oh, that sounds cool, let's invest. It'll be like, well, hang on, specifically, how does that technology reduce costs in this industry sector or whatever the application is? So I totally agree with Liz's points. Lots of caution.
Sure. Phil, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I think I agree with Mark. I think there's lots of caution. I wonder if you had to sort of lay down a number of things that have to be true in order for that caution to reduce slightly. I wonder if we look across the sort of political, macro political sort of situation we're in, and you think, well, you know, we're hopeful of maybe a Brexit, some kind of Brexit deal in the coming weeks. We're hopeful of potentially further lockdown measures being released in the coming weeks. We're hopeful, very hopeful, everyone's praying, I'm sure, for, you know, a vaccine or a better series of cures for people that get infected with COVID. If all of that were turned out well and was good, what would that do to confidence at that point? Because then I think people would go, okay, all those things that were pending and unsure and uncertain and unclear have been resolved, and whether the answer is good or bad on the first two, at least you've got some clarity. I think that's probably what most people are waiting for.
Okay. We have a sort of a question which links this question and the previous question together a little bit. I think it was asked under the previous question, but I think it's relevant to this. It's from Adam Teakle. Thank you, Adam. It says, one of the hardest hit industries has been events management. However, given the conversation around collaboration and us going, oh, we can do this, you know, via technology, surely this business line will see significant changes and likely increased demand. Do the panel agree? I think that's an area where investment might you know, certainly ramp up, looking for people who are embracing maybe to run traditional events, but in a non-traditional way.
Yeah, I think that that's definitely going to be the case. One of the things that we also often don't think about is that for people in different time zones, for people in developing countries, they may want to be involved in several events. I can think of friends in East Africa and South Africa who are very interested in several events that they're just not able to travel to for a variety of reasons. So I think it also opens up an entirely new market of customers for those events management companies that they've never had before in different locations they otherwise would have never been able to reach.
I mean, just in response to that, we've made a decision for our next financial year, runs from July to June, to run no in-person events, which is a big thing. You think of a number of, you know, big global in-person events that we run. We ran our Build conference recently, even from a digital footprint perspective, because we made it obviously digital only, not even, you know, a digital component of it. It's the most digitally attended event that we've ever had, and the strongest feedback we've ever had, because it was focused on a digital audience. Our social reach increased. So, you know, just even as a company using different channels now, we've seen a positive impact. And exactly to the point that was made by Bontle, it's a, you know, it's a global event now, and people can watch the recording in their time zone when it suits them. So that actually drove up participation. So definitely a new, exciting dynamic.
I think the challenge on events is how to make them engaging. You know, on remote events, virtual events. I mean, you could say that for all events, right? You can just pitch up, and it's how you can have the audience participation, how you can make it, you know, engaging. And I think that's where technology can really enable it. I mean, the ability on this chat, for example, but we could equally do like a Mentimeter survey of everybody if we wanted to. Some of the technology, I think, that enables that collaboration and that engagement is here and now. You've almost just got to use your imagination. And I have to say that I think the big set piece conferences, the Sapphires, the Oracle World, the AWS, I mean, I'm not sure we'll ever quite go back to those huge events, because, you know, and I feel sorry for the hotels that host them. It's not just the event companies, of course, it's the whole entourage where they will host them as well, has this knock-on effect. But I think something much more dynamic, pick and choose, it's engaging, pop in and out, different pricing modules and so on. There's going to be a lot of innovation around this, to be honest.
I think, as you say, Mark, you know, you use the word imagination there, and I've not got that great an imagination, but you can see that there will be things beyond what we're thinking about now. You know, I think at the minute we're all thinking about Zoom, Hangouts, Microsoft Team, you know, oh, I wish it had a better whiteboard. I wish it had, I think that's all like yesterday almost. I think there's somebody who's going to come along and really revolutionize this space and make the thing so much more engaging. I mean, obviously this panel is incredibly engaging. You know, this is how to do it if anybody's looking for a benchmark. But right, okay, on that sour note, let's move on. Thanks for that one. Okay, Derrick, I've got a toughie for you now, right? So as a hardened deliverer of technology, it's a well-established fact that technology often justifies its budget when there's a big outage or a security breach. Something goes wrong, we all go, I've been telling you about that for months, and they go, all right, you can have the money now, right? How do we think companies will view internal technical investment, you know, their commitment to the technology budget in light of the current situation? They've had a taste of what we can do.
Yeah.
You know, are they going to back us a bit more now? What changes do you think are going to happen there? And everybody else get lined up, because I all saw you getting enthusiastic with this question, so I know you've all got some input.
What I would say there is definitely, David, a new expectation in terms of the pace that technology teams can deliver at. You know, the way, you know, as technology delivery teams, we've all responded to the initial crisis has been quite incredible. Projects that, you know, we would have seen in our customer environments that would have taken 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, being literally delivered in days. You know, we went, you know, from virtually no usage of Teams across the NHS to 1.2 million users enabled in a week. And you just couldn't have thought of a project like that before the crisis, but necessity drove it. So I think the expectations of our technology delivery teams, there's not a CEO in the land that doesn't think that it can't be done quicker than it could be done before. And I realize that, you know, we're maybe running things at a different security posture than we'd be comfortable with. So, you know, that has to be tempered in some ways, and there has to be a bit of responsibility in there. But I think expectations have changed. So we've kind of gone through that, if you like, respond stage. Organizations are looking to, you know, recover and move into whatever this new normal is. But then there's this stage of, you know, wanting to reimagine whatever service that they're delivering to their customer base is. What does that look like in the new world? And the expectation that technology will absolutely be at the core of that, and we won't be waiting for a, you know, 36-month return on investment. That it'll have to be things that have an immediate return to the organization within short timeframes that lead the organization through that recovery into this reimagined state.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I've been fortunate, perhaps is the wrong word, but certainly had the experience of living through, this is the third major outage style material activity that I've had in my career. I was working for one of the UK's biggest police forces during 7/7 some years ago now, and the approach they took immediately after that on how they invested in their tech was notably different, and very, very quickly indeed. They realised that a number of things weren't right. They couldn't operate underground effectively. So that was a stepping change in the way policing works in the UK, I think, and we led the world on that in that project. I was also with a telecoms company that had a fairly notable cyber breach a few years back, and again, following that, there was a huge level of investment and a different approach to doing things. Culture changed, technology got a bigger share of the board agenda, and so forth. And obviously this with COVID currently. So I don't think it's just about technology. I think it changes culture. I think it changes the way people think. It changes the way boards think. Changes the way people collaborate in the business when they're forced together. We've all seen it, I'm sure, in all our companies. When you're forced together to do something, it is amazing how powerful that something can be when there is only one thing to focus on. I think when you've got 100 things to focus on, the collaboration sort of is less evident, and the results take longer. So I think those two things, it's a cultural thing and it is a tech thing. You have to invest in both to make some long-term gains.
I think to jump in from what you're saying, Phil, I couldn't agree more. One of the big things people also forget about agile companies and about agile ways of working is that people are fundamentally at the core of agile. So one of the things we've been doing is really investing much more in our people and our people who work in technology. So making sure that people are getting the agile coaching, for example, that they need so that they have the ability to work remotely and collaboratively at the same time. Investing in putting together different types of teams and cross-functional teams so that they're able to work in ways they haven't been able to work before. And also making sure that we're helping leaders with resilience, with servant leadership, with their mental well-being. These are also investments the companies need to make right now in order to make sure that their technology function is functioning at the optimal performance.
Yeah, I mean, I'd just sort of pile in on this, but I can't totally agree. I mean, I think this has highlighted, I think the big shift has been the speed. I mean, Derrick mentioned it. It's about the speed around which you can do things now. So I think there is an expectation now, which is, oh, all technology can be done in a couple of weeks. I mean, I know Gartner and Forrester have both come out and said that tech spending overall this year, I think, is going to be down 8%, although cloud is going to be, I think Gartner said, is going to be increasing by, I think they came out and said 24% next year. So tech spending is going to be down overall, but in certain areas kind of up. And I don't know, I think the only other point I'd add is I think the relationship between the CIO and the CFO is probably even more important than ever before. Because if you think about it, if it's all about speed and it's about responsiveness and agility and so on, if there's one set of business processes that can hinder that, it's, dare I say, traditional finance processes around planning, budgeting, forecasting, and that traditional sort of focus. So I think at the heart of this is a message around, certainly the organizations I've seen that have responded the best, are where the CIO and the CFO have that really trusted close partnership, whereby you can be more agile in how you invest and how you scale up things, scale things down, and so on. And that's certainly not the case in many organizations because of that traditional, annual, quarterly, monthly set of processes that are waterfall processes that don't exactly encourage agility.
And slightly changing the question, but I think Dan Silkman, one of our attendees, hi Dan, he's saying UK are the 34th in the world in average broadband speed, with users averaging 22 megabits per second. We need to get people's speed up. Taiwan are first with 85 megabits per second. We are way behind. So given that we were talking about companies investing internally, I don't want to turn political, but do we need more investment here, or is it up to the private companies from the government, or is it up to the private companies to drive these things? Anybody can chip in with that one. Anybody brave enough, that is.
I'll be brave. I think just like we invest in roads, just like we invest in infrastructure, if distributed working is what it takes for the economy to succeed, I think there's certainly a role for government in that. I can't imagine that not being the case. If there's a scenario where there isn't a vaccine for a long time, or it takes, or the vaccine needs to be kind of re-upped. There's also a scenario where companies do evolve and remote working becomes a lot more normal. So, to the extent government is, everyone collectively, then, why wouldn't we be investing in that just like we do with power and roads?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think there's an element of government investment, of course, but obviously for larger organizations, frankly, like ourselves, to invest ahead of time. We went through our own journey during the crisis of seeing peak demand on our infrastructure, and it presented challenges to us. So we've kind of gone through, I would say, 2 years of digital transformation ourselves in the first couple of months of the crisis. So I would say there's a partnership to be had here with government that says, we can almost forecast the demand for this kind of service. What really does make the UK a truly digital economy, and make sure that some of those investments feel like co-investments, because there is a business opportunity as that digital economy grow for, frankly, organizations like ourselves and others off the back of that.
It's interesting, Derrick, that you recognise the company you work for is one of the global leaders, and I think at times like this, it's natural that maybe smaller companies will look to those global brands, the technology innovators, to see what they're doing and to gain some confidence from them. Yeah, I think that's a natural thing to happen. I think that spins us nicely onto our final question before we maybe look at a few more questions from the audience, which is, as we've discussed, there have been many companies who've struggled, and as a result of that, this may drive consolidation, mergers, and acquisitions activity in the market. is this something that's been a long time coming, or is this going to have a negative impact on healthy competition? And I think that's something which, you know, we may see some of the bigger companies sort of swooping down, as occasionally happens, and picking up those small companies. Are they taking advantage? Is it just a competitive marketplace? And what's it mean for the consumer? Mark, is that one that you maybe want to pick up on? You touch on a lot of those companies, and I'm sure you've been involved in some pretty hefty mergers and acquisitions.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess the first point is, as we talked about earlier, I think, David, I mean, transactions are down. I mean, certainly in the month of April, we got some hard facts. So transactions in the UK were down 97%. So that was because everyone was not obviously focusing on the transactions with the uncertainty around that. I mean, I think in any transaction, the two things that really matter are the valuation of the target. So the, you know, how much are you going to pay for that business? Which, of course, given the uncertainty at the moment, is difficult to judge, given the uncertainty around things that are out of the control of a business, around government policy, around lockdown, social distancing, which would all impact the valuation, for example, of bars and restaurants at the moment, you know, the extent to which you can get revenue sooner rather than later. So that's one thing that always matters. And then, of course, once you're doing, or you've done the deal, it's all about effective integration. And then, of course, you know, that's all about synergy and cultural alignment and all those other things. So I think it does depend. Inevitably, those with big pockets will swoop. I mean, for many years, we've had this slightly, it's partly a global phenomenon, it's really a UK phenomenon around this notion of zombie companies, which, because of, you know, interest rates being held so low, they're still trundling along, but they're not really generating wealth. They're not, you know, in all dimensions. And I suspect this COVID will clean some of that out. I don't know that really negatively, but it's gonna clean some of that out, and it will mean, frankly, sadly, unemployment is going to go up, but there will be some increased activity, I suspect, sometime into next year. But it's, but I mean, to rip on the point, I mean, I think Liz made it earlier. It's CFOs are and boards are definitely being very, very careful and shrewd at the moment around what they're investing in, why. And you know, sometimes M&A is a vanity project, right? I've got a big transaction going on. It's almost like honestly, I don't see too much of that happening. You know, this is going to be about the hard numbers, the value, and being certain around it, and having that, you know, certainty around things you can't control, Brexit, COVID, and all of the other things.
So Liz, given that, you know, you work in the fintech challenger bank area. You know, challenger banks are very customer focused. They're all about making that whole experience, you know, getting rid of the big old dinosaurs and, you know, focusing in using digital technology and strategies to focus in and have that closer relationship with their customer. And yet those digital challengers, those challenger banks themselves may be open for acquisition by the deep pockets of the traditional banks. How's that going to play out, and what does that mean for customer value?
So to sort of repeat what I said earlier in the session, I think a lot of banking, a lot of fintech is just going to go in fast forward. So things that would have happened more slowly will happen more quickly. I think we're definitely on a path towards the commoditization of banking services. So, you know, AWS or GCP, you know, cloud services were, you know, are a fairly new concept, or were not so long ago, you know, kind of a new concept. Now, if you want to set up a new online business, you go, well, I'm going to go to Amazon, I'm going to go to Google, and I'm just going to do everything in the cloud. There are a small number of companies now saying, hey, I can do banking things in a, you know, a cloud native way and in a commoditized kind of pick and choose way. So I think that curve, which would have taken a large number of years, is going to take a smaller number of years. I think the big banks are going to have to lean on that quite a bit more. And I think the challengers who are already doing that, they're kind of sharing out their capabilities, you know, little by little, are going to be under more pressure to kind of, you know, offer a menu of commoditized financial services to each other. And I'm sure there are lots of parallels in industries I know less well, where there's this, again, this evolutionary pressure, to focus to move more quickly towards that ultimate customer value. And I think the net result will be more customer value. You'll have, banking that's hopefully cheaper, that's more available, that you can do without, going to a branch. There'll be a lot of pain on the way, but I think there will be a net good.
Great. Okay. Well, that brings us to the end of our official questions. I think hopefully everybody will agree that created a good round of debate and insight from our panelists. So thank you very much for that, guys. We've got quite a few questions come through on the Q&A. I'm gonna randomly pick off a few of those. Quite a few of them seem to be associated. It's difficult. Somebody needs to invent a way that I can put the Q&A questions on an eyeball here, so I can carry on looking at you guys. It's a little tip for one of you to go away and invent. I haven't got time. I'm drinking wine. I'm going to pick out one that I saw a moment ago, which I thought sort of resonates to the last point we were making. This is from Deepak. Thank you, Deepak. There is a lot of nervousness on the news of unemployment increasing due to COVID-19. However, in his view, given that we have to do things differently, the hiring will increase once the lockdown is relaxed. What's the view from the panel, and how do they think businesses should approach this? So first of all, it's an assumption that Deepak is saying, well, things will get better and we'll need to do more with technology. And I think a lot of our conversation is leading us to that conclusion that technology is about to have another new day. But should we be looking to, for those who are being made unemployed, should we be looking to get them now and perhaps cheaper than we might in other times? Is that morally the right thing to do? What's the sort of balance there? Bontle, you're looking at me like I just said something horrible. So come on, counteract that idea.
So I absolutely don't think we should be using this as a time to exploit people. Exactly the opposite. I think digital for us presents opportunities to employ more people who have the skill sets that we're looking for, especially around automation, around data and data science. There's a lot of those kind of new roles that are also coming up, growth hackers and things that people haven't seen before. But in our case also, we have seen that because we lost our call centers that were offshore, we ended up having to hire 500 people onshore to be able to fulfill the needs of our call center, for example, and work in a very different way and move a lot of our customer care to digital customer care. And so it presented an opportunity and allowed us to be able to hire quite a few people in this time. So I definitely think that there's going to be opportunities for people, especially those who've invested in growing a skill set in new ways of working, and those who've invested in growing developer skill sets, data skill set going forward.
Yeah, I agree. And just for the record, I'm just the question master here. I'm asking controversial questions. I believe that we should support people in this time and not.
Yeah, I think one thing I couldn't agree more with Bontle. I mean, I think the other point I would just spark to thought is trust, if you think more broadly, is in really short supply at the moment. I mean, you just look across the Atlantic and the fake news, and I can say that because my wife's American, but just the situation, it's pretty horrendous, socially, politically, just generally. Trust, there's a lack of trust in big tech as well, because they've got my data, are they going to use it in a way that I'm comfortable with? It goes beyond GDPR and what's required around compliance. It's more of a cultural point. And I really do think there's something coming out of this around building trust. We talked at the start of this, David, around customers. Customers they will move if you lose trust with them, and you can lose trust very, very quickly. It's hard to gain trust. But I think to Bontle's point around employees, I mean, the one thing I've learned around this in terms of speaking to employees about what's happening and what you can do, the best organizations are the authentic leaders who've said, this is what I believe, purpose-led and all of the rest of it. Really, really important. Because if you're not, and you lose the trust of your employees, as soon as things do pick up, they're going to go, whether that's new employees or existing ones. So I think trust is a really big thing to come out of this, to be honest.
And surely they're only going to have more choices because now they're not geographically constrained so much, right? because suddenly everybody can work in this new way. And it's like, actually, I'm going to apply for that job in Edinburgh, and the guys in Edinburgh are going to accept me, even though I'm in, Wales or London or, wherever sort of thing. So I think that in itself is going to create a new dynamic in the employment market, which we're all going to have to get used to, quite frankly, and hopefully embrace.
I just want to say that for me, that's an incredibly important point, because it is a vehicle for diversity and better inclusion in all industries. I think there's a gendered aspect to it, where people are now seeing those who used to have most of the childcare duties, and actually, to be honest, in most cases still do, are women. And so this gives women an opportunity to be able to, through flexible working, maybe be able to work or return to work when they hadn't before. It also gives those with disabilities, for example, those who weren't able to physically travel to be in a workplace, the opportunity for the first time to be able to work. And we always were able to make these allowances. We just didn't before it was impacting everyone. So this is really an opportunity, I think, for organizations to embrace making the scales a little bit more equal for their employees.
Everyone's nodding now. Other panelists, you got some views on those things?
Yeah, I mean, completely agree with that. We're really consciously looking at this as an opportunity to widen our talent pool, particularly in the area of accessibility. We've always, had that view of inclusiveness in our organization, but many of the roles that we have in the UK are customer-facing organisations, so there's always been that challenge of somebody having a commute to the customer, and the customer maybe not having the same, positive view on, an accessible workspace. But actually customers are becoming more used to us working remotely and providing that service remotely. And actually we've driven some of those incredible projects without ever anybody having gone on site. So that opportunity to widen that talent pool is absolutely there through this, and something that we're going to push very hard.
I think we as leaders have just a huge opportunity and just a tremendous responsibility right now. We're going to look back in a few years and we're going to say, what did we do? Did we go back to the status quo? Did we go back to kind of the command and control structures that I don't think this panel is much of a fan of, or did we find ways to innovate? Did we find ways to be more inclusive and, to support people doing their jobs? And it's with the number of participants we have and the panelists, it's on the likes of us to really commit to those kinds of changes.
I think that's true. It speaks that we're all sort of in agreement that there is opportunity here, but also, as my friend Spider-Man says, with great power comes great responsibility, right? So we've got to make sure that we approach that opportunity in the right way, and look after the people that we as leaders and our audience, I'm sure as senior leaders in the technology arena, all have a responsibility to do. Talking about that, it sounds like, if I think about the way in which we've answered most of these questions, nobody's panicking, about COVID-19. It obviously, from a health and life point of view, is a huge threat globally. But from our industry point of view, all of the questions, all of the answers have been very positive about the opportunity, about where technology is placed now, and the fact that we were able to quickly and swiftly come to the aid of the party and really help do that. So I'm getting very, very positive vibe from that. I think we probably would describe this as the new normal, and Adam has sent a question through saying that this is a phrase that's become commonplace now, the new normal. Yeah, it's probably a little bit broad to ask what it is. Adam's asked what its key attributes are, and then he's gone on to a question about and will it be impacted by will the fulcrum for it be the COVID vaccine? I'm not sure any of us are qualified to answer that, not unless anybody's got a medical doctor's degree in their pocket. But so we might not want to focus on that bit. But new normal, what are its key attributes going to be? Do we think? Phil, you got any views on that?
Yeah, I think to pick up on Lizzie's point and join it to this one, I think it's how do you convince everyone involved at the leadership community and our organisations to not go back to the old way, when the old way perhaps is less effective than now. there is a balance question we've touched on sort of mental well-being, because people are working long days at home with, in some cases, no breaks, and we're having to learn, I think, as a leadership team, to make sure some of our teams do try and find a break, and that's difficult when you're all working different schedules and working flexibly at different times. Finding those points it is hard, but I think whatever that, and the phrase has also become fairly ubiquitous now, but whatever that new normal thing is, we haven't achieved anything, I don't think, through this horrible crisis if we don't have something which is an enduring model, which is better than it was before, both for well-being and for productivity and for tech as a team. And we are, as technologists, we are probably one of the few industries that can lead that. And there's questions on the chat bar around, how do you educate boards, and how do you make sure, Mark's point, CIO and CFO working closely together, how does all that happen quickly before the elastic contracts and you're back where you started at the beginning of March, I think is the biggest trick we have to land in the next couple of weeks before that starts to happen when lockdown comes off. So
I think the phrase new normal, I think the potential risk we have is that people get fatigue from the thought of the new normal. I was with one of my customer CIOs last week virtually, and at the start of the meeting, he gave the coaching that if he hears one more supplier use the phrase new normal, he's going to batter them. And thankfully, he gave me that feedback at the start of the meeting, so it was good coaching in the moment. But there's a lot of expertise popping up in this space, and there's so many things that we don't know. So for those that have technology solutions that they're bringing to their customer environment, we just have to be very careful that we're not reinventing existing solutions just to stick that new normal title onto it. And I think actually being able to speak the customer's language, being able to understand the industries, we've had good insights on the challenges in financial services, but we actually see that there are going to be markets that have a very positive outlook, that if you've got the industry expertise and the technology solution to bring, areas like pharma, healthcare, government that are, having real growth at the moment in terms of their demand for technology. There is opportunity there, but it's having the right solutions for the customer and actually understanding their individual situation.
I take your point, Derrick, about new normal being overused, but Steve Williams has commented and said, is the new normal the phrase to take over from digital transformation? I mean, I'll give anything to stop saying digital transformation in meetings, so I can live with a new normal for a while until we get something else. Anybody else got any views on the new normal?
I'd just add one quick thing. I think for me, the new normal, if I had to sum it up, the things that I've seen, at least in our business, the new normal is going to be much more cross-functional and collaborative than people worked before. It's going to be digital first. It's going to be flexible for our customers and for our employees. And I think the biggest thing and most exciting thing for me is that it's also going to move beyond silly measures of whether we should do things or not, such as utilization or output base, and really move on to looking at value, both financial and non-financial, in the short and the long term. It's made us really have to interrogate why we are doing certain things and make sure that everything we're doing from a technology or digital perspective, we can also translate into the language of the business. Because if we can't do that, it's impossible for us to be able to actually get these things done. But it's also made the business really be more interested and much more engaged in understanding the value of all the technology we're creating. So for me, value is going to be at the core. And of course, the human element, I think, is really going to be more important than ever to companies going forward in this new normal.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was just going to, Phil, you use the elastic, analogy, going back, being pulled back to the old way. I think it's a really interesting concept, whether that will happen. And maybe in certain organizations that may. I just feel as though that elastic has been sort of stretched so much that and people will vote, workers will work with, vote with their feet. They want to collaborate more. They want to remote work, have more flexibility and agility, that Bontle said. And I don't know, you have to be a pretty strong anti-DNA in an organization for that elastic to pull right back. My thought. It depends on the company, I guess, but I don't know what you think.
No, I think you're right, and people will. I usually put it. I think you use the term "walk with their feet" if they're not comfortable. And I've had teams of new newly qualified devs who join an organisation because they only want to deal with the culture that or the purpose that organisation has. That's the reason they join. And it's fascinating when that changes. They quite often go fairly quickly. So we'll wait and see. But I think you're right. It can't go back to how it was. Otherwise, we've learned nothing in the last 3 months.
All right. Thank you very much for that, guys. We've got some more questions, and some of them are related to the topics we've already covered. So we'll share those, and maybe Chris and Jack can pick up on them offline afterwards. Thanks very much to the panel, to Mark, Bontle, Derrick, Phil, and Liz. Hopefully we had some interesting conversations. I will just leave you with this thought that one of our audience, a chap who I'm going to name and shame, called David Linwood. Hello, David. Good evening. He, on the point you were making earlier, Mark, about engagement and making sure that these kind of sessions are fully engaged, he says he totally agrees that they have to be 100% about engaging your audience. And then he confessed that he'd wandered off and put some dinner on. So I just want to make sure that David's having a good evening, enjoying his dinner. And hopefully we were able to provide him with some thought-provoking chat whilst he was tucking into his sausage and mash. Thank you, everybody, for a fabulously engaged panel. Really good to talk with you all on these important issues. And I think it's shown us that as leaders, we are all leading the way and making sure that we're thinking about our customers and what we can do for them, but really thinking about our staff, current and future, and how we're going to make sure that we get this right for them going forward. And it's really good when I come on these sort of panels with peers and talk about those things. It really reinforces me to make sure I go back and do the best for my team as well. So hopefully we've all got a bit of inspiration from each other and also from some of the questions from our audience. Chris, can I hand back to you?
Yeah, I was just going to say, look, thanks for the London Tech Leaders team, David, and all the speakers and everyone who attended us or attended the session this evening. It's fully recorded, so we're going to share it and upload it. But I just want to say a massive thanks for everyone joining us tonight. David, you mentioned, obviously, I said you're back. Obviously, we love having you on board. So amazing session from everyone. And yeah, hopefully everyone found it very useful and the content relevant. Any questions you've got or feedback, please send across. And obviously our next session is going to be hosted in the next couple of months. So if you are keen on speaking at future events, yeah, just drop us a note. Cheers, everyone. Have a great evening. Thank you very much.